Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rift Talks. As always, I'm your host, Dave Troop, aka Trooper, and we've got another great week of action to cover for you guys this week. As you guys know, LCS semifinals are done. The LCS finals are set up. The LCS, I keep calling it that. It's the LEC now. It's going to take me a while. But the LEC playoffs are ready to roll, so we've got that preview ready for you guys as well. And as usual, we've got a team fight to break down, some hot takes, and TFT. As always, there's a patch every week, so that always provides some great content. But first, let's hop into this team fight. Let's break this down for you guys. And this week, I kind of wanted to do something a little bit different. The last weeks, I've been picking a fight that kind of blew the game open. It was very evenly matched, and one team made a really poor decision or another. This was somewhat along that vein, but the game was further along in being decided. So let's pull up the screen here, and then I can kind of show you guys what I mean. So this game comes from the semifinal game. If you guys just want to pause it really fast, we'll just start from the very beginning. So C9 has a slight lead here. CLG's behind, but the big thing is that Stixxay is really, really fed on the Varus. Like, he's really, really strong. As you guys can see in the bottom there, he's actually got a full item advantage over the Caitlyn. So essentially, CLG's been hanging around. They haven't been able to be knocked out of this game just yet, and it's largely been due to how powerful Stixxay is. So essentially, for them to win here, he cannot get caught out, and unfortunately, that's exactly what happens. As you guys see in the top left of your screen there, you have Svenskeren along with the Gangplank coming in from that jungle area, Licorice, and they're going to come in from behind. Now, CLG has Ruin on the flank as well, but the thing is that if you see in the bottom, it's kind of hard to see from this exact still, but they're actually pinging him, so they know he's there. They're not going to be surprised by that Akali flank. So here, CLG thinks that they have an advantage. They think that they can take this fight, despite the fact that you see right behind Svenskeren on the Gragas, there is actually a control ward there down for CLG. So they should know that at the very minimum, Svenskeren's there. I'm not entirely sure if they had vision on Licorice because he came around from the blue buff side rather than from the river. Regardless, they should have an inkling that they're both coming. But let's roll the clip a couple of seconds here and see how this engage starts off. So you see Wiggly, he's kind of just hiding in that corridor, and he's going to EQ, get himself in, and try and engage onto Sneaky. Unfortunately, he doesn't actually hit Sneaky, and Zeyzal with a nice lantern to get him out of dodge, and immediately Stixxay, Biofrost, Power of Evil, they're walking forward, but that Gangplank Licorice ult just immediately chunks Stixxay down to half health. The re-engage comes out from Nixie, gets Wiggly down to about half health, and you see all sorts of damage coming down now onto the back line of CLG. Biofrost has to use that Devour to try and get Varus out of trouble, but unfortunately it's not enough, and immediately we see Varus goes down. So at this point, the fight's over. And essentially the game ends right here as well, because it takes no time for them to kill Biofrost. Really nice Gragas ult there that caused all that engage. And essentially, at this point, they're just picking up the stragglers. Wiggly and Power of Evil do get away with their lives, which was actually really, really important because they did manage to kill a couple people afterwards at the Baron, but Ruin is completely, like, you see a nice Power of Evil EQ combo there on the Syndra, but it's not enough to get Ruin out alive. Nixie's able to follow up the damage. They're going to chase down Wiggly, but he has his EQ back up on off cooldown, and he's able to get himself out. And you see immediately C9 says, okay, we're going to turn around and we are going to go get the Baron. This was honestly like a very game-breaking fight because up until this point, even though C9 did have a lead, CLG was hanging in it. But the problem was that Stixxay walked forward. They didn't respect the Gangplank and the Svenskeren Gragas enough. And you see Gragas there with the charge forward, throws that ultimate down, and just knocks everyone, stuns them into the walls. Like, they're just sitting ducks at that point. And even though Biofrost uses the Devour, because Tom Kench no longer gets the speed or anything like that, like, once he devours, he's very, very slow. He can't flash, can't do anything. So it was essentially just delaying the inevitable. There, Zeyzal hits a really, really nice hook, gets Ruin. Ruin's entire flank essentially was just negated. It wasn't like he was going to be able to do a whole lot on that anyway. He wasn't very strong at this point. Like, obviously Akali is always a threat, can always do a lot of damage, but it wasn't like Ruin was super fed like we saw Jensen get on that Akali champion a couple of games in his series. So this was a fight that, I understand why CLG took it. they thought, hey, maybe here we can get an engage. Maybe we can save this game. Stixxay is really, really strong. Maybe we can catch out Sneaky. Unfortunately, they didn't get the catch onto Sneaky. They put themselves into a really bad position. They did not respect the flank from Svenskeren and Licorice, and it cost them the game. And ultimately, I mean, you don't want to say it cost them the series, but we'll get into that series in just a second. But games 3 and 4 were really, really close. So to have game 2 be blown so wide open at only the 20, like you can see there at the top of the screen, it's only 23 minutes into the game. So to have your fate sealed this early, super unfortunate. CLG did make a really good play after this fight, trying to get the Baron, but it just wasn't enough. They didn't get the Baron. C9 still got it, but they did take out quite a few members. I think it was three members of Cloud9 got taken out trying to do that. But it just, end of the day, picking a fight like this, you have to be so sure. You have to be super certain that you are not going to get surprised, that you are going to get that pick if you're going to go all in like that. Otherwise, this is what can happen, even at the highest levels of play. So, don't flame your jungler and solo queue for trying an engage like this, because even in the LCS semifinals, this can happen to you. Anyway, I thought that was a pretty interesting fight and a little bit different than what we normally do. Normally, we try and find an ace or something like that and a really explosive moment. This was very explosive, and even though it was skewed in one team's favor, which I usually try to avoid, I thought this was a pivotal moment because CLG was playing so well in the couple of minutes before that had they picked a smarter fight, had they won that fight, that could have changed the tide of the entire game and ultimately the series. But alas, it wasn't meant to be. So anyway, that's that team fight breakdown. Hope you guys learned something. Hope you found it useful. And let's move into the LCS playoffs. So last weekend was the semifinals. Both series were really, really good, actually. Really, really entertaining series. Fairly close, too, which a lot of people were not expecting. I think a lot of people thought that Liquid was just going to steamroll Clutch. Was it going to be a 3-0 or a 3-1? Like, that was kind of the debate. Even the casters were saying it. Meanwhile, the Cloud9 CLG thing, even though they were even in the standings, Cloud9 handily beat CLG in the tiebreakers. So a lot of people had C9 just kind of walking through that series as well. And it was kind of like that. Like on paper, it looked like they won 3-1. But when you actually watch the games, it wasn't quite that straightforward. But we're going to do things in reverse. We're going to hop into the Liquid Clutch series first, even though that was the second day of play. And we'll kind of walk you guys through this series. So the first shocker was that the series went 5 games. Nobody expected this. But Jensen, my lord, especially in this first game on the Akali, like he just went off. It was absolutely incredible to watch, like how dominant he was on this champion. And honestly, you have to give big props to the Gragas, not to the Gragas play, sorry, to Xmithy as well on the Jarvan. Like he dies in a couple of situations and things don't go as well for him as they might have been able to otherwise. But he made a lot of really, really aggressive plays, and he actually was really responsible for helping get that gigantic lead up there. But game 1 was all Jensen, getting that Akali, and it was just too much pressure. Too much pressure, and once you get an Akali that's that far ahead, you're kind of done. Game 2, Clutch turned things around. Demonte had a fantastic game on Kiana. Actually, Kiana was really, really powerful every single game that we saw her in all weekend long. I think she won every single game. I think whoever had Kiana won the game. So it wasn't surprising that we were seeing that champion get banned out quite a bit. And whenever she was available, people were using her to great effect. That Kiana champion is so strong in the mid lane. Like I know she was kind of designed inherently as a jungler, but you have to remember that when you play her mid, you're doing a lot of roaming. You're getting a lot of fights in the river, and just her team fights around objectives are so incredibly powerful. And Demonte used her to great effect. They tried a lane swap. Oh no, sorry. That is the other series that they tried to lane swap in game 2. I'm getting my series mixed up. But essentially, Clutch. They've been the best team all season long at getting the early dragons and getting the early Rift Herald. Like they've dominated with that. They've always gotten really good early objective control. They were, I think, the best team in the entire LCS at getting Rift Herald and First Tower. And obviously, those two things go hand in hand. But game 2 was a perfect example of this. Jensen was still really, really good on Akali. But unfortunately, Demonte was just way too good on the Kiana. And there was just nothing that could be done to stop him. He just hard carried this game, honestly. And it was really, really impressive stuff. Game 3, so this series was very back and forth. Like no team won more than a game in a row, which was kind of it made it very fun to watch because you'd win one, lose one, win one, lose one. And like I said, a lot of people thought this was going to be a quick 3-0. Game 3, the first thing to note is that, Liquid made an adjustment to their bot lane, and they did this multiple times. They did this in Game 5 as well, but this time they went for a really, really strong laning bottom lane. So they took the Lux and the Caitlyn, which, against the Xayah Nautilus, like they just can't really fight that lane. They're going to be poked down constantly. They're getting chunked. And the Team Liquid bot lane is just so good. They're so mechanically prevalent that if you give them champions that allow them to dominate that laning phase, you're going to be in a whole lot of trouble. Liquid started super strong in this game. I mean, they used that bottom lane to great effect. They got themselves ahead. Like you see, Caitlyn here already has a 30 CS lead, even though the Xayah already has a kill. Doesn't really matter. They're just able to chunk turrets, use that Caitlyn to pressure all the lanes, get the neutral objectives. Like they were just playing very, very high levels League of Legends. It looked great. Jensen still on the Akali. This was the kind of thing that blew my mind, actually, through the first couple of games, was that they just allowed Jensen to play Akali. They thought they could deal with him. And, Demonte did a great job on the Kiana. And after they won Game 2, I can kind of see why they thought that. But ultimately, you can't let Jensen play this champion. I mean, he was so good. Demonte Silas, not as good as his Kiana, unfortunately, and wasn't able to contain him. Again, you see Jensen fed. Like, he's just always got multiple kills, very few deaths. I don't think he died once in the first game, actually. The second game was a little bit harder for him. But Impact also had a phenomenal series. He was using this Renekton like really, really well, really smart teleports. And Game 3 was just off those early advantages. They just snowballed the game to the point where really Clutch couldn't do a whole lot. And you could kind of tell watching some of the player cams, like Demonte looked pretty flustered. The other person that kind of disappeared from these first few games actually was Huni. Despite being a really, really good top laner, he just was not his usual self in these first couple of games. And even in this game, like something felt off with him. It was very lackluster. He got the Aatrox here. It's a very strong pick, but he just wasn't able to use it to the same effect that Impact was when he was getting that Aatrox or that Renekton and some of his more comfort picks. But this game was essentially just a slow death. Liquid did a great job picking up that early advantage, using that Caitlyn Lux to take towers, take objectives, put pressure all over the map. And they really utilized that pressure well, forced Clutch to make rotations, predicted those rotations, and was able to get the better of them pretty much every single time. And again, you just see Jensen constantly coming from behind, constantly flanking, just putting in absolute work on that Akali. Game 4 is the one that I thought, okay, Liquid might be in real trouble here because of the draft phase. I think if you guys watched last week, I was talking about how good Cody-san was playing on the Sivir. And Rumble for Huni, that's his champ. Like that, people banned that from him all season long. When they didn't ban it, he picked it and he dominated on it. And there's a good reason why. I mean, he's so comfortable on it. He uses that equalizer so well. See here, Jensen getting that first blood, but unfortunately, he kind of gets like minion blocked and isn't able to get out without taking that tower damage and does get himself killed. So it's not quite as clean as it could be. But Jensen definitely proved that, as skilled as Demonte is, Jensen was by far the better mid laner in this series. He managed to get his kills himself on the board every single game and make himself a real threat. Their top, you saw, Impact getting dove on the Jace. Now, the Jace pick is interesting because you pick it in a lane to kind of dominate the lane, right? You're not supposed to just win lane. You're supposed to win lane handedly. And against Huni's Rumble, he was unable to do that. They did a fantastic job of shutting him down. Demonte there with some great skill. Like, don't get me wrong, this guy is absolutely unbelievable. Like that play on Irelia to get himself out safely using the dodges, really, really good stuff. And he's definitely somebody that people are going to have to watch out for. But again, you see Cody-san there on the Sivir, knows exactly what his thresholds are, knows how he can flash, and if necessary, he can ult to get out. It just provides him with so much safety, and he's so used to that champion that whenever he's on it, again, you see Clutch picking up the early Rift Herald in their typical Clutch fashion. But Liquid wasn't really content to just go down. They were able to trade an early dragon, and they kept themselves on the board. But the problem was, as the game progressed, that more and more fights happen right around turrets, 5v5 or right around neutral objectives in the river. And those are the places that Rumble loves to fight. He is so good with that equalizer. He can create such a massive zone of control that it becomes really, really scary to fight against that. And Huni is just so strong on that Rumble. And there was really nothing Liquid could do, honestly. Like, they just fell behind. and Jace basically became somewhat useless. Like he was still, Impact did a good enough job on him. But when you play Jace, you're giving up a lot of CC, tankiness. Like, you're supposed to be far ahead. You're supposed to be a massive threat. And unfortunately, because of how well Huni played that Rumble throughout the series, or throughout this game, excuse me, it just wasn't possible for Impact to get that lead that you want on Jace, to make your presence felt in that same way. Team fights, again, like, just watch Huni here as he ults. Like, it's just, his equalizers were remarkable this entire series. He's so good, or in this entire game. I keep saying series, but unfortunately, Liquid was smart enough to not give him. There you see the equalizer come down, splits up the team perfectly. Doublelift can't really move forward now. He can't really walk through that. Smithy gets chunked down tremendously. Core JJ taking a lot of damage. And then there you see Demonte getting in through that equalizer. He's going to engage and basically force both Smithy and Core JJ to get out with their lives. But they have to burn Flash. Doublelift, unfortunately, doesn't have the flash up. He's not able to get out alive, and just easy objectives based off that equalizer, essentially. Like, he is one of the few players that knows how to engage with it perfectly. He knows how to split the team. He knows how to get the damage down, and really that just opens up so many objectives. I mean, I always say that Rumble and Orianna are two champions that, when you're talking about playoffs or you're talking about the World Championship, you always see them make a reappearance, and it's because of how strong their zone of control is in the river and in team fight areas, like in a lane right around a turret. They're able to hit so many people, and you have to respect that ultimate, that even if they're not necessarily in the meta, you can guarantee they will find themselves in the meta during the biggest games of the season. And especially when you have a player like Huni, who's so good at Rumble. And we saw Orianna as well, actually, in the second series on Power of Evil. I mean, these guys, they're some of the oldest champions in the game. Pro players have a ton of practice on them, and these guys will show you exactly why they're so powerful at the highest level. When a game can come down to one team fight around Dragon or one team fight around Baron, they're just champions you want. Again, look at that equalizer. Like, Core JJ and Doublelift can't get anywhere near that fight, and it just allows Cody-san to burst Smithy. They're going to burst down Jensen, but actually, this was the one play that almost saved the game for Liquid. Jensen there went absolutely beast mode. He does get away with his life temporarily, but Demonte wasn't going to let that happen. Had to chase him down, use the blast cone to get out to safety. Phenomenal game 4. And this set the stage for our 5th and final game of the series, where a lot of people, were amazed that this was the case. Like, this series was not supposed to go 5 games. I mean, you have to give Clutch a ton of credit. They are clearly one of the best teams in the LCS at getting the upset and playing this really weird, scrappy style. And things started out strong for them, too. They managed to get an early kill. They managed to get an early lead. But here, actually, this was really funny because they went for the Rift Herald the way they always do, and Liquid predicted it. Liquid knew this was going to happen and sent their bot lane up, their top lane up, their top lane down. They were all ready for this. They had all based beforehand. They knew that Rift Herald was going to come out, and they managed to catch Clutch there. And that marked the beginning of the end for Clutch Gaming. The other thing to notice, I'm sure you guys, if you watch the game, you 100% notice, and if you're just watching it like these highlights on the screen now, you'll see we've got a Sonateric bot lane. We haven't seen that since they got nerfed significantly, quite a few patches ago. I think we've only seen one game of it in any region, and it was in Korea on this patch, and they lost. But Core JJ and Doublelift are so strong on this composition. And the other thing to note is that neither team here has an assassin. So instead of, the Akalis and the Kianas and the Silases that we've been seeing, and the Irelia even that we were seeing in some of these past games, both teams kind of went straight up, which means like you have to get through their front line to get to their back line. And here the Sonateric is so strong for that because it basically gives you infinite sustain. As long as Sona doesn't get caught, and Doublelift's very, very good at positioning himself safely, there's just very little way to kill this team. And the longer the fight goes, the more heals Sona gets, the more sustain she gets for her team. Same with Tarek. And it just makes them so difficult to kill. Now, Clutch put up a good fight. Huni on the Tristana. I'm not a big fan of the Tristana top. I know we saw it quite a bit in the LCS, and I think we saw it in the quarterfinals too, and I don't think it won, or if not the quarterfinals, in the last week of the regular season. A couple weeks ago, we were seeing the Tristana top, and I don't think it won a game. It's just you have to get so far ahead on it because, again, you're just giving up so much in terms of tankiness, in terms of CC, in terms of all the things and mobility even that the top laners like that are popular in the meta right now that they have so much of. Tristana is basically just another AD carry. Now, albeit she's a very good one, she can take care of herself, but it's very, very difficult. So look at this fight here. Like, it's a sustained fight for a very long period of time. And you see how many players on the side of Team Liquid go low, but then you see Doublelift just in the back there, healing everybody up. He gives them the speed boost. He's able to use the empowered Qs to great effect, especially once he got the Lich Bane. And as soon as these heals come through, now all of a sudden, Team Liquid's got some health bars again. And they re-engage. And once they re-engage, like Jensen actually this was his worst game of the series by far. He got caught out on the Corki a couple times. He had some questionable plays, but when it mattered, he hit the skill shots. Here, Huni's going to get burst down, as well as Vulcan, I believe. Beautiful flash from the Aatrox, flash Q to take everybody out, get that re-engage. And you just see these really, really long fights. Liquid just had this death ball comp that you could not burst down, and as soon as you got into a sustain war with them, you 100% lost. Because there was too much healing coming out from Sona and from Doublelift. And also, from Core JJ on the Taric. Like, it was too much sustain, and unfortunately, Clutch just didn't have enough burst damage on their side to be able to really effectively burst someone down, take them out, give themselves the advantage that they needed in those full 5v5s. Here, a nice play from Huni to kind of catch Impact unawares and take him out, but this was all just really delaying the inevitable. It was a very, very impressive win from Team Liquid. They showed why that bot lane was considered to have the best Sona Taric, at least in North America, if not potentially the world, when this was a very popular bot lane to run. And anytime they got into these big team fight skirmishes, you can just see it here again. All the sustain coming out from Doublelift. Like, look at how much stuff just happened there, and the Core JJ is at 60% health, and everybody else is topped off. And by the time they go get the Baron, look, Core JJ is full health again. And this was a couple of seconds later. It's just a ridiculous amount of sustain. And when you don't bring the damage to burst it down, you're not going to be able to do anything. I thought the Trundle pick from a Smithy was really, really smart here as well. He was able to kind of put that pillar down, really create those zones that it was very difficult for Clutch to run away from. He would put the pillar behind them in the jungle, give his team the speed boost. It was just, this was a great composition, great draft phase from Liquid. Great job banning the Rumble. They recognized that how powerful that was, and they realized that we can't do this again. Even with Jensen on the Silas and stealing the Rumble ults, it just clearly Huni had more proficiency on that champion and was able to utilize it better. So game 5 ended up going the way of Liquid, and it was tense, but Liquid will be in the finals for the fourth straight split. I think if they win this finals that's coming up this weekend, they'll be the first team in LCS history to win 4 straight splits in the playoffs. So if you guys have any other plans this weekend, you need to cancel them, because you could literally watch history in the making. Overall, yeah, so Huni, when he wasn't on Rumble, not as impressive. Pretty unfortunate. I know he really, really wants to win. DeMonte really wanted to win for him. They've been teammates for a while, but when he wasn't playing on the Rumble, he just didn't look quite as comfortable. And unfortunately for him, Impact was able to outplay him on pretty much every other champion. And Jensen outplayed DeMonte essentially the entire series. Maybe that last game was a slight exception, just because of some of the mistakes that Jensen made, where he got caught out kind of too aggressively. There was the one play that was it's like a meme on Reddit right now. He just took his package as Corki and just flew into onto the bottom side bush there. Had no idea that, I believe it was Karma who was hiding there, and then he just got burst down immediately. And that kind of delayed the end for Clutch. They were able to kind of stave off Liquid for another couple minutes because of that, but ultimately it's too little too late. Liquid played a phenomenal game, a phenomenal series overall, despite the Game 4 setback and despite Game 2, and they're going to be in your finals. So for the other semifinals, that was also a good series. CLG and Cloud9. Now, this series wasn't quite as close, even though it ended up being closer than it looks on paper. Cloud9, so much playoff experience, especially Sneaky. That guy's been on the team since Cloud9 came into the league. He's been a part of this roster for the entire time, and he knows what he's doing, and it showed. That typical Cloud9 playstyle is still there. They haven't lost it. So these are some clips from Game 2 already, I think. But essentially the first game, there was a lot of just early pressure from C9, a lot of early and mid pressure. So you had Wiggly and Power of Evil were just not able to keep up with Miggsy and Svenskeren at all. Jensen, sorry, not Jensen. Oh my God, I'm getting my words all twisted. But essentially, the first game came down to an incredible 1-3-1 play the entire time. Cloud9 got the advantages in the solo lanes, and they just knew how to use them. There was very little that CLG could do, and it actually ended up being this very strange Karma build on Power of Evil, which really hurt the team fight. But it was essentially they had no choice. He had to go for that build just to try. I think he went Zhonya's and then Gauntlet. Yeah, Iceborne. Which if you're going to do that, you should probably go Iceborne and then Zhonya's. But I think he realized that he had to go this build afterwards. He went the original Zhonya's for the Kiana, and then decided, oh no, if I don't get a Gauntlet, we're not going to be able to stop the split push at all. But the problem was then they couldn't team fight either, and they still couldn't stop the split push. Licorice, fantastic all series long, played really, really good Aatrox in the first couple of games. And essentially, this was a textbook Cloud9 victory. They got small advantages. You know, they've done this from behind too, but with small advantages, it's almost impossible to deal with them. They get the advantages and they play the map perfectly. They force you to rotate. They make better decisions than you. And, you know, it's that old death by 1,000 cuts thing where they just constantly are taking these tiny, tiny advantages wherever they can, maximizing them. And there was nothing CLG could do. Absolutely nothing. And again, we see the Kiana, great effect, 501 on Nixie there. Really, really good stuff coming out of him. And this game was pretty straightforward. This was by far the biggest blowout of the entire series. Game 2 was the one where we just showed you that team fight a little bit earlier. Much closer game. The first bit was very back and forth. But ultimately, and I have to give credit here to Stixay because he's the one who really kept them in this game. I mean, he was farming up so well on the Varus. He got so much gold. He was essentially the one who was the big threat, and they couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't do anything to kind of keep him out of the game, no matter how hard they tried. Zazal really impressed me this whole series with his support play too. Had no problem taking the death in certain situations if he knew it was going to get his team 2 or 3 kills. Really, really selfless play, really great engages, and exactly what you want from a support player, especially at this highest level. Very Lemon Nation-esque, I must say. So I think he's a great fit for the way Cloud9 plays. And you can see it in this series. They were mad that they weren't in the finals last split. I think it was Svenskeren who was talking about it. Was really, really upset that they didn't make it. They thought they were the better team over TSM, and then TSM almost beat Liquid. They were not happy. And today, not today, but the other day, they looked like they had something to prove. And they did. So this game, too, was, like I said, by far the closest one. And unfortunately, though, for CLG, that one fight that we broke down a little bit earlier, on the team fight breakdown, that's where things really flipped for them. Because up until that point, as you guys can see here from these highlights and these replays, like CLG was holding their own. They were picking up kills. They were trading. The one thing that did happen here that was actually really bad was the lane swap. So as you notice, Ruin is set for the mid laner in this game and Power of Evil is set for the top lane. They decided to lane swap. Power of Evil was clearly not used to playing the Syndra in the top lane, and he got caught out a couple times. Like you can see here, he's already 0-4 at 22 minutes in. He just kept getting taken out. And while he's a great Syndra player, there's a lot of nuances to top lane that, you know, a lot of mid laners, if they don't play a lot of top lane, it's not quite the same. I think it's easier to go from top to mid than it is from mid to top, especially when you're talking about playing a champion like Syndra that has 0 escape, 0 mobility. And here's the fight that we showed you guys earlier. Just Power of Evil and Wiggly just getting chased out. And here's what I was talking about with that Baron. So because those players actually did manage to survive, they're going to come back here and re-engage. And it's very difficult. Unfortunately, Cloud9 really couldn't get out a beautiful Varus ult there from Stixay. And they just delete a couple of players on the side of C9. And that's going to buy them some time, right? The problem is that Jensen got really, really strong on the Sylas, and he was able to take that Varus ult at times and use it against CLG. With all that AP power, that Varus ult really, really hurts. And, you know, AP Varus isn't something you really see, but I think you used to it, maybe like season 3 or something. Not in pro play, but it was definitely like a somewhat trollish yet viable solo queue build, almost like AP Trist or APE or something. And I mean, it's that ultimate has crazy ratios on it, and Nixie was able to show exactly what you can do with a fed Sylas on that champion. CLG there does get the dragon, so this is kind of what I'm saying. Even though they were down by quite a bit, they were still getting objectives. They were still in this game, even after that terrible team fight. If that had not happened, this game could have looked very, very differently for them. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. They just bullied Power of Evil way too hard. He did start to kind of climb back into the game, but you see how fed that gangplank is. Like Licorice 505. I think Licorice is probably... He's definitely in the conversation for MVP of this series. And that's exactly what I was talking about. Nixie with the Verisalt, just destroying everybody with all that AP that he built on Sylas. So another champion that's just really, really strong right now is Sylas. He's just been doing so much damage, killing so many people. You see him used to great effect in both series. Him and Kiana, definitely two of the higher power or higher value mid lanes. All right, game 3. This was the weirdest game because at this point, it's 2-0. You think, okay, well, Cloud9's probably got this. They're not going to get reverse swept again, are they? Like, that's not going to happen to them for a second time in 2 splits. And at the start of the game, you were thinking absolutely not. I mean, Cloud9 got off to a massive, massive lead. I think at one point they actually managed to get it up to 10K. Oh, so yeah, they had the Kiana. So this was, I think, the one game in this weekend that Kiana lost. And it was really just because, oh no, sorry. That's my apologies. Kiana's on CLG, so Kiana did not lose this game. It looked like she was going to, but she didn't. If you look at the Cloud9 team comp, the problem was that they didn't really have a way to engage and end the game. So Draven, obviously, on Sneaky, that's always been one of his favorite champs. There he gets 850 gold for a kill with that Draven passive. These guys just get off to a massive, massive start, and it looks like textbook C9. Like, they're just going to be able to end this game. I mean, Wiggly was multiple levels down, was super behind on the Elise. Was almost making people think, like, is Elise as bad in regular League of Legends as she is in TFT? But no, Elise used to be one of the best junglers in the game. Licorice, though, still having a great game again. Like, he was just so strong this whole series on both the Aatrox, the Gangplank. I mean, he played everything super, super well. Really textbook. Here, he realizes that 3 people are coming. He kind of decides at this point he's got to get out. Chase maybe a little bit too far, but still is able to get out with his life. And, C9 just accrues this gigantic lead. But about once they go to close it, they realize that they don't have a way to engage. They have a Rek'Sai who can engage, sort of. They have a Talia who can engage, sort of. I mean, not really. Basically, they're stuck on Morgana bindings. Like, that's all they got. Zeyzal has to hit his Qs or they're not going to be able to start a fight. And it really, really hurt them because they were so far ahead and they just could not find the fights. And it wasn't like Zeyzal wasn't hitting his Qs either. Don't get me wrong. It's just by the end of the game, the guys on CLG were positioning themselves much more intelligently, where it was almost impossible for Cloud9 to follow up, even if a binding did come down. CLG, great job with the Dragons this entire series. You see Ruin here using the Jace. And again, this is another game actually where we see the Jace picked and not that effective. Like, he just wasn't able to get that early lead. Licorice outplayed him significantly up there in the top lane. 3 deaths for Jace early, even though he was getting great CS. He just wasn't able to build a massive lead over the Aatrox. And then the Aatrox provided a lot more value for the majority of the game. But C9 wasn't able to close out. So at that point, you have this massive comeback. CLG goes from down 10,000 gold to down, I think it was about 2,000 or 1,000 at the end of the game, and then they might have evened it up. The game dragged on for so long that by the end, that gold differential was completely negligible. It didn't make a difference. Everybody had full items, and essentially what it came down to was levels. And that's the other interesting thing, is because C9 was so ahead for so long, and they kind of destroyed all of CLG's base, CLG was just stuck in their base farming. But the thing about that is that it means your guys are going to be getting constant waves. You just have waves coming to you, wave after wave after wave. And they were actually higher level at the end of the game than the guys on C9 were, just because of all that minion XP that they were consistently getting. And there were a couple really, really good fights on the side of CLG, that kind of delayed the game, this being one of them. But you just see, like, other than maybe a flash Q from Aatrox or a perfect binding from Zazal, they had no way. C9 had no way to like force a fight. If CLG didn't want to fight them, they didn't have to. And that became a big, big problem. And it was essentially what ultimately allowed CLG to claw back into the game and get this victory and force a game 4. Now everybody was worried because we'd all seen the reverse sweep last split. And people were thinking, oh no, is this going to happen again? And it almost looked like it was going to at the start of game 4 because it was not a great start for Cloud9. CLG got some early kills. They got themselves a great lead. And Power of Evil was on his Orianna, which is his champion. And as I mentioned when I was just talking about Huni with Rumble, these champions are so powerful in these really high-level games because often the game will come down to 1 or 2 team fights. And that champion has such a gigantic zone of control that can be used so effectively around things like Dragon, Baron, Rift Herald, even around a mid lane turret. Ruin here, though, getting a great kill onto Licorice on the Kled. Licorice was a little bit overzealous there. He'd been playing so well all series that I think he just being a little bit cocky. But he did return the favor a little bit later on. Managed to pick up a solo kill of his own, and he was out farming Akali tremendously at that point, so it wasn't the biggest deal. But a lot of good kills coming out from the side of CLG early. Svenskeren also, this whole series, I have to say, was fantastic on the Gragas. Like, he was really putting this champion to great use, showing and kind of demonstrating like all the utility and power that this guy still has. And it's kind of a mystery that he's not picked even more, because I definitely think he's one of the top tier junglers, especially in the right hands right now. And here's what I'm talking about. Ruin gets a little bit overzealous. Tower dives the Kled. Kled remounts and is able to get that kill and even that scoreline back up, get a CS lead back up. And that kind of marks the beginning of the end. CLG was able to put up a good fight, but they started to slowly lose their advantages to the C9 players. Slowly but surely, again, Licorice, phenomenal, always managing to be in the right place at the right time. Nixie there, phenomenal Zonias to keep himself out of that Orianna ult. But at the end of the day, even with Power of Evil on the Ori, I think there was one fight at the end where he only managed to hit one person with the ultimate, and that was a really, really big problem. There, Wiggly kind of getting caught out, even though the Ori, and that's what I'm talking about, like in little areas like that, Orianna able to hit that ultimate, just destroy both people by herself, taking no damage. But too little. Not enough, unfortunately. They needed an extra game cushion. They really needed to win that second game. Had they won that second game, this would have been a 2-2, would have been a 3-1 series for them. Or at least, maybe, yeah, essentially, that's what they had to do. So it's too bad. Definitely too bad for the side of CLG. But they put up a really good fight. And C9 is one of the best teams, always has been. So now we've got our finals set up. It's Cloud9 versus Team Liquid. And I think you have to give the edge to Liquid, ultimately. They've just been too good for too long. But this Cloud9 team is definitely a team that, if you're talking about who can beat this Liquid roster, Cloud9 definitely has the best shot at it in the North American LCS. And this is an organization that has always produced teams that surprise, that play the best when the most is on the line. They were always the top performing North American team at the World Championship. And it's going to be a really, really good series. It's something I'm definitely looking forward to watching this weekend. I hope you guys are as well. Make sure you come back next weekend. We'll be breaking all of that action down and figuring out what exactly went right and what went wrong for the two teams involved. And we will have a North American champion. And we will also be breaking down after that exactly what the path to Worlds is for all the teams that are left that have a shot in North America, and we'll kind of, map that out for you guys so you have a little bit of an idea of what that will look like before the World Championship itself. With that being said, oh my God, I talked about that forever. The LEC Playoffs. So I will set this up for you guys really, really quick. So the LEC is not using the same format as the LCS. It's not like the top two teams get a bye and other teams have to play for spots. It's kind of a different format. So first, let's take a look at the standings for the end of the season standings in the LEC. And it's no surprise. Oh, we got the bottom of the standings. So yeah, Excel, Misfits, Origin, they're gone. But G2, Fnatic, Splice, Shelky, Rogue, and Vitality are your 6 playoff teams. So G2 Esports, no surprise there. They were the best team. They won MSI, best team all split. And here are the matchups. So as you can see, Splice will be taking on Rogue. Shelky will be taking on Vitality. I think you have to give, you definitely have to give Splice the edge over Rogue and Shelky the edge over Vitality. I find it very interesting that they put G2 and Fnatic. I'm hoping that that's some sort of typo on the side of Riot, because that to me doesn't make sense. Like, why would you have the best 2 teams, battle it out? I guess actually what'll happen there is it'll create 2 brackets. So there'll be 2 different semifinal matches: the losers versus the winners and the losers, which is kind of weird. It's a weird format for not being a double elimination tournament. It's kind of a strange setup, but this is what we'll be looking at in Europe next week. So my personal predictions, we got Splice coming out on top of Rogue. We got Shelky coming out on top of Vitality. We got G2 Esports. They've been the best team all season long. I don't see that stopping. I think they're going to be the LEC champions at the end of the split. They've been very, very solid, and they've shown no signs of slowing down. Like, I think 2 of their 3 losses came in the first couple of weeks when they were openly stating they were still taking rest after MSI. They weren't practicing very much, and they were just trying to kind of, avoid their players burning out. And it seems to have paid off because they've looked incredible the rest of the split. So there you have it. I think we probably will see G2 and Fnatic in the finals of the LEC as well. I see, even though I think Fnatic's going to lose to G2 in the quarters, I think they'll get through the kind of second half of the semis and get themselves into that final position. But that should be interesting as well. That's also the first round is also taking place this weekend, so definitely you guys want to make sure you check that out. That's really all I have to say on Europe. Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch the games for Europe this past weekend. I was watching North America and had some other family stuff going on, so I have not had a chance to review those VODs yet, so I don't want to talk too long about something that can't really talk about intelligently. Hot takes. It's one of my favorite sections. So there was a Reddit post this week. Does League of Legends make people toxic? I've always kind of find this interesting with the League of Legends community. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I came from Halo. Definitions of toxic in League versus other like old school like Call of Duty. Anybody who was on Xbox Live in like 2009 knows what I'm talking about. It's different. It's very, very different. For one, there's no voice, and I mean League has never had voice. But essentially, this is kind of a post about this person said League doesn't make people toxic. People act this way all the time. His essential argument was, if you've ever worked retail or you've ever done, service industry or any job like that, you realize that there are jerks everywhere, and it's not just League. So this person's essential claim is that League of Legends doesn't make people jerks, or the internet doesn't make people jerks, I guess. So there's a few things. One, I kind of agree that I don't think that, for your average person, 9 out of 10 games, if somebody's toxic 10 out of 10 games, they're probably a jerk in real life too. But the one-off game, I'm far more likely to give some credence to the fact that there's factors about League of Legends and about the internet in general that kind of make people toxic. So I'll kind of lay out the quick argument that I have here towards it. And it's essentially that with League, the games are so long. Like, I mean, Riot's done some good work. Excuse me, some good work in terms of trying to make the game shorter on average. And you do seem to get a lot more 20-minute, 30-minute max games in solo queue, but you also get ridiculously long games as well. And when you're in a game for 35, 40 minutes, and you have one person on your team who's inting, or you have one person on your team who makes a really dumb play and gets caught out after a great 40-minute battle, and just does, like, you're paying him for, 15 seconds, back up, what are you doing? Why are you walking that way? And then he goes and he gets caught because it was pretty obvious that was what was about to happen. I understand where the rage comes from. It can feel like a gigantic waste of time, especially because losing a game in an ELO-based ladder system isn't losing, one game's worth of time. It's losing multiple. Because if that was a game you should have won, somebody in your team throws it, not only did you lose all the time in that game, but instead of being up 20 points, you're down 20 points. So you actually have to win 2 games to get to where you should have been. So it basically triples the time investment required for you to move up the ladder, which obviously causes some frustration. Secondly, I think there is definitely a lot of credence to the fact that being anonymous on the internet can make you say some things and do some things you might not do if you were sitting right next to the person and had to stare them in the eyes. A lot of people, feel like that level of anonymity will protect them. Obviously Riot has taken toxicity very, very seriously and does, ban people and all sorts of stuff for that sort of behavior. But it's super easy to understand how people will kind of, when they're not face to face with you, they'll say some things that they wouldn't maybe say normally. Like all you have to do is go on Twitter and read a Twitter thread about basically anything, and you'll realize how much more ridiculous people are on the internet. Now, maybe those people are like that in their personal lives too. I don't know, but I doubt it. I think there's a lot to do with the fact that you can just be a random name and say what you want and kind of get away with it. And if you're only toxic like 1 in 15 games, you're probably not going to get banned. So a lot of these players, they're still on the servers, right? It's not like somebody who's toxic every single game, sure, that person Riot's going to find and remove. But if you have one bad game where you freak out and then, for 10, 14 games after that, you're positive and cheery and all that sort of stuff, that will probably even itself out as long as you don't cross certain lines. Like I believe they use some sort of automated, like some algorithms and stuff to find like certain words and stuff like that or certain phrases. And if you're saying that sort of stuff, then you're probably, out of luck no matter how good you are in the other games. But I definitely think the League makes people toxic. Although I will say video games in general, I don't think it's just League. I think it's just video games in general, especially online. Like if you played Overwatch, you've probably heard those voice comms. They're awful sometimes. Like I said, if you played anything on Xbox Live before 2010 or even probably before 2012, you've heard some things. You've heard some stuff. Your ears have gone through the trauma. So I don't think it's like a problem with League inherently. I don't think League makes people toxic. I think it's just an inherent fact about video games. People who play competitive video games usually are competitive. They don't like to lose. They think, a lot of people think that they're better than they are, maybe, and they get upset when things don't go their way, and they blame other people, and they take things out on people who aren't in their immediate vicinity, aka you on the other side of the server. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. I think it's always an interesting conversation. I don't think that we should focus on it as much. Like there are mute buttons, people. If somebody's being a jerk, just hit that mute button. You don't need to make a big deal about it, and it's just not necessary. Like you can just literally prevent yourself from seeing their words. And I recommend doing that because as soon as you start typing, that's the thing about League, right? You can't just talk. You actually have to take your fingers off the keyboard and skills and type messages where you can't send a skill. I don't know if anybody's ever, been in the middle of a message where then you'll get surprised or something and you try and go hit your Q button or your R button or something or your D to flash away or your F or whatever it is. And you can't get away because you're in that chat box. And, it's just not worth it, guys. It's not worth it. Just mute them. All right. Teamfight Tactics. The last couple of minutes here, we will go through this last patch. Now, this last patch was gigantic, so I'm not going to go through it in as much detail as I normally do, just because if I did, we'd be here for another hour. And I'm sure you guys are starting to get a little sick of listening to me talk. So we'll move through this a little bit quickly. First thing to note is that there's already been a change from this patch. So if you read the patch notes a couple of days ago when it first dropped, and you're like, oh, I'm all caught up, I don't need to pay attention. They did revert the buff to nobles. So they buffed nobles in this patch and then said, never mind, that's way too strong, and they removed it. So it's back to what it was before this patch. So 6 nobles is still good, but it's not good enough to warrant holding on to and looking for the entire game. Like if you get it, you get the KL early, maybe you try and you have a couple of the other units like a Leona or something, maybe you work backwards. But I don't think it's, right when this patch dropped, people were just looking and holding nobles the entire game. I don't think it's at that point right now. But there are some things that are happening every single game that are almost equally frustrating. But before we get into that, there's a new overtime mode. I honestly, when they announced it, I was not excited about this, but I think it's okay, actually. Like, I've never seen a game where I'm like, oh, I could have won this, but then the earth kicked in and I lost. Like, I don't think that really happens. But essentially, 30 seconds into the round, into your fight, they'll speed things up tremendously. They boost, attack speed and damage and cooldowns and all this sort of stuff to make it so that the fight just ends faster, so that there's less ties, which is good because tying was super, super annoying, especially when 2 people just had enough regen to kind of keep themselves from killing each other indefinitely. The one thing that's weaker in this overtime mode is regen and health. So They got rid of that. I think that's a good addition to the game. Wasn't sure about it right when it dropped, but now that I've had a couple days to play with it, I think it's great. Rank changes doesn't really affect you unless you're in Grandmaster or above, but now just like League of Legends, if you get demoted from Master, you're back in Diamond 1. If you get demoted from Grandmaster, you're back in Diamond 1. So it's kind of evens out that top of the ladder, unless you're in like the top 0.01% of the player base, though that doesn't affect you at all. Player changes, they've actually tweaked again player damage. So if you guys remember a couple patches ago, they made it so that damage was less. You took less damage from players, and then that way that made the games last longer. They think that they last too long. So they kind of tweaked it a little bit again. They added a little bit more damage in, and now it's somewhere in between what they were on release and what it is now, and what it was, pre this patch. So I think it's in a good spot right now, damage-wise. Honestly, like the games don't take, I feel like in 30, 40 minutes tops, a game is done, which is fine. I think that's more than enough time. And I think it's good that you do have that cushion to kind of stay alive as long as you can cushion the early damage. The late game damage hurts though. So definitely, like if you go on a losing streak towards the end of the game, you have only a couple of turns to get your stuff figured out, because it hurts a lot, especially if you lose by like 4 or 5 units or 6 units, like you're just getting creamed. You're going to be out of the game really, really fast. Brawlers. So now with let's actually start with the top with Hextech. So the Hextech champions that we talked about the last couple times, they're out now. Camille, pretty garbage. Jace, pretty garbage. Vi, stupid, very broken. And Jinx, even more so. So it's kind of a nice balance between a couple of champs that suck and a couple of champs that are really, really good. The problem is that the Hextech buff is super OP. Like, especially for you only need to have 2 out there to get it to work. So a lot of people are running Jinx Vi right now. They're definitely better. I mean, you can run Blade Masters. You don't really see many for Hextechs. I can't think of a composition where that would be good. It's not really a thing. Maybe at low elo it's a thing, but at higher elos it's not really a thing. But it is really, really strong. The 2 is super powerful because it's only 2 units. Jinx and Vi are both good units anyway, so it's not like you're taxing yourself to put them on. Brawler's strong right now. Gunslingers is strong right now. You can make Jinx a Blade Master. Blade Masters are still good, obviously. So gives you a lot of synergy, and it basically forces your opponents to position in really dumb ways, spread out their items, and kind of mess up their team comp in ways, and their ideal positioning in ways that they wouldn't normally want to. Furthermore, basically that buff lasts so long that if it hits your carry, like you just lose. Like even if you're spreading your guys out in hopes that it doesn't hit the person you really, really want to not get owned. But if that person loses their items, it feels really, really bad. So I'm hoping that they at least nerf the 2. I think that they need to like half the time that it's available, and maybe put it out for keep the buff where it is for 4, and then maybe it'd be more worth it to try and run 4 Hextechs if somebody has perfect items and that's why they're killing you. But ultimately, I don't know how I feel still, even after playing it for a couple of days. I'm not the biggest fan. I think that items were one of the things that required a little bit more skill, a little bit more planning, a little bit more forethought. You had to plan compositions around items, and then to have that just completely negated and taken away, especially for the duration that it's taken away and for so little investment, only 2 units that are both strong on their own, it just feels really bad. And honestly, right now, the meta just revolves around Jinx. Like, everybody's picking up Jinx. Jinx and Draven, if you don't have one of those 2, like, you just lose. 100%. So that's kind of frustrating. Unless you get 6 Nobles with the level 2 Kayle. 6 Nobles was kind of fighting it at the start, but then since they reverted it, like, I haven't seen any Nobles in the past 24 hours. Not in the top couple anyway. Like, people are still running it, but they're not placing top 1 and just destroying your team. So, okay. Brawlers. They nerfed the 6 brawler bonus, which we actually never got to see on live. That was just on PvP, but that's fine because 6 brawler with Jinx and a Lucian or Jinx and a Gangplank or something is really, really strong right now anyway. So, I mean, it's a really, really good comp. You guys should definitely try running that if you haven't. It's worth it, and I can't even believe that they had that at 1200 before. It would even have been more broken, because a lot of the brawler units are pretty good too. I mean, the only ones that suck really are Warwick and Rek'Sai. Like, they're not ideal to have out there. But the rest of the units are all really, really strong on their own. And then when you give them all that extra HP, they just don't die. It gives Jinx plenty of time, especially if you throw some Ionic Sparks on there and you have the fully stacked Jinx. It's really, really hard. And again, you get Jinx and Vi, so you get that synergy, and the other team has no items. Feels bad, man. Feels bad. Demon, they tried to kind of buff them a little bit. They reworked it, and I haven't seen too much of it, to be honest with you. So I don't necessarily think, like, I'm not entirely sure where their power level sits right now, because I actually haven't run it myself yet, and I haven't seen it be used too often. And when I did see it get used, it felt underwhelming. Like, I've never been destroyed by a demon team where I was like, oh my god, demons are super strong again. But now they basically changed it. So you have a 40% chance flat at all ranks to burn 20 mana and return X number of mana, 15, 30, 45, depending on how many demons you have out there. So it's much better than the complete mana burn, which before was ridiculous, and the chance scaling. Now you have flat chance, flat mana burn, only 20 mana, which is, somewhere in between 33 to 20%, depending on the opponent champion's mana pool of their mana. And you get some mana refunded. So for a couple of the spellcasters, it could work nicely. For people like Morg who want to pop their ult, but her ult lasts so long anyway that it's really, really hard for her to get 2 off. So maybe it guarantees you getting the first one, but I don't know. I haven't seen it too much. I don't think it's that top tier of a comp. Nobles got buffed and then reverted. They nerfed 3P Sorcerer. Thank God. That was really, really strong in the last patch, but it was a slight nerf. I think it's still strong. It's just, like I said, people are running the Draven Jinx right now. That seems to be way more popular. Wild, they buffed again, so it's 12% per stack instead of 10% attack speed per stack. I think it's getting to the point where this could be too strong, but it's still not that successful. Like, it's not being used that much, so I'm thinking it's okay where it is, though. Honestly, like 12%, that's 60% on 5 attacks. Attack speed buff. That's 3 recurve bows. That's pretty good, especially if you get 4 wild out there. That's an insane. I think it's like 27. Yeah, it's 27 recurve bows on a full 9-man comp. So it's a lot of value. I mean, obviously, you're getting a ton of value for the brawler, 6 brawlers as well, but there's definitely some ways to make that composition work. At least they buffed, but is still bad. Kha'Zix, they nerfed, still good early, and falls off even harder now. So you definitely have to swap Kha'Zix out. Assassins are still not good. They're not popular. It's just the pathing and the damage, the itemization. Like, there's just so many problems with Assassins right now. They just don't feel good to run. If you get a level 2 Kha'Zix really early, run it. Sure, it does some good damage, but after that, you've got to get rid of it. It's not going to do you any favors. Vayne, they nerfed her attack speed, and they buffed her percentage of maximum health. I still think Vayne is one of the worst units in the game. Like, even I've gotten her to level 3, put all my items on her, like try to see if you can have a hyper carry Vayne. It still doesn't work. Maybe with like a rapid fire cannon, Gwynsu's, and then like a static shiv or something. Like, you really have to stack all of the attack speed items in the game on her. But you need some healing on her too. So it's tough. It's tough. Maybe if you had 6 nobles, level 3 Vayne, you can stack items on her. But honestly, at that point, the items are probably better on Kayle anyway. So she's still a bad unit. Braum, they nerfed his health. Thank God. He's still super strong early game, but not quite as ridiculous and obnoxious as he was before this patch. But still, if you see a Braum, pick him up, throw him out there early game. But he's no longer like one of the, if not the best, just throw him in their unit, even at level 1 in the game before like the 4 and 5s. So he's more in line with where he should be now. Lulu, they actually nerfed her pretty hard. Her ability health at level 3 and 2, at 2 not so much, but at level 3 they nerfed her really hard. Zed, they gave a slight buff to, but again, like, ninjas aren't seeing any play, assassins aren't seeing any play, and slight tweaks to their kit is not what's going to save them. For one, all you have to do is build Phantom Dancers, and the assassin passive is completely useless. So they're in a tough spot. I don't know what Riot's got to do about them. I don't even have a creative solution for them. It's a tough position they're in with that passive and the Phantom Dancer existing. Aatrox, so they did a bunch of buffs with a bunch of people, Aatrox included, where it wasn't really a buff, but it was just like they won't cast their ultimate if nobody's there, which is great, because before they would just cast their ultimate if nobody was there. Looking at you, Misfortune, you still do that. It's awful. Katarina, they gave a pretty big buff to her AD, but it doesn't help her charge her ult any faster. She still needs 60 mana at least for her to be a viable unit. If you're running 4 Imperials, great, but she's not out there to clean up. Unless you have all these mana items. If you have like 4 tiers, then sure, just throw them all on her and watch her just jump to the back line and insta-gib everybody. Then she's a good unit. Apart from that, still not very good. Again, assassin problem. Kennen, still pretty good. And again, they just fixed his ult not casting. Kali, they buffed, but still not worth picking up. She's not good compared to the other 4 cost units in the game. You can pick up a Draven, you can pick up a Jinx, you can pick up a Sejuani. Gnar even, Akali just feels super underwhelming for a 4 cost unit. She's not really worth the investment. And again, Ninja's Assassin's just not good. Cho'Gath, they nerfed him hard, but he's still pretty strong. Honestly, if you stack items on Cho'Gath, he will do more damage with that Q if he hits the whole team than a Draven or a Jinx sometimes. He'll just delete people, especially if you have Sorcerers, you have Void, or anything like that out there to help him. Really, really good unit still, but I think he's more fair now. He's not super broken like he was last patch where you had to get Cho'Gath or you lost. Karthus. So they basically made it harder for Karthus to get 2 ults off, which I think is good. It was obnoxious how many ults Karthus could get. So what they did was they changed his starting mana from 0 to 40 and his mana required for ult from 85 to 125. So it's the same thing for the first ult, but it's going to be harder to get second ult. Items. So Hush has been changed to mana lock now. So instead of it silencing you, it prevents you from getting mana from any source. So that means even if people attack you, you're not getting the mana from that. It's actually really good on gunslingers. It's not the best item in the game right now, but it's definitely not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I.e., they buffed the crit damage from 150% to 200%. Really good on Jinx as a 3rd item right now. Ionic Spark, they nerfed it, so it only does 125 damage instead of 150, but it stacks now. So you can build multiple of them, so it's good. Definitely, like I said, especially in a really tanky composition, you throw a couple of Ionic Sparks around, you're going to get a lot of burst damage coming through. Locket, shield duration is 6 seconds. Still garbage. Morellonomicon and Red Buff. So they actually even these out. So you have Morello as the AP version and Red Buff as the AD version. They both do 20% still. Same for Morello's. For Red Buff, it's a buff. And it's over 10 seconds now instead of 5 seconds. So it's a longer, it's more like it's less about burst damage and more about reducing healing. But it's really, really good against carries like Jinx and Draven that do like to get that healing with a Bloodthirst or something like that. For 10 seconds, they can't heal up. Because, again, the way that healing works in TFT, it's either 100%, there's no 33% reduction on healing. It's like you just can't heal at all. Excuse me. So, pretty strong items, especially in the current meta. Definitely pick those up if you can. Redemption, they gave more health. Instead of 1,000 health, it's 1,500 health. I still don't think this item is very good. The problem is that when people use it, and it's very unpredictable when you're going to die. So that's kind of an issue. A lot of times it'll proc and nobody's going to be inside that range, and it just kind of makes it so you can't do anything. Even though it pops off, there's nobody there to get that healing. It's a waste of an item. So I wouldn't recommend building it. Static Shiv, they nerfed by 1 bounce, but buffed it by 10 damage. So it's going to hit less targets, but do slightly more damage. Still think it's a good item. Not quite as good late game once people have 8-9 units, but still the go-to item for Rangers, and it's not a bad item on Lucian. Really, really good on Lucian early still, actually. Might even be better for the first couple levels because you'll just hit those champions a little bit harder, help them take them down a little bit quicker. So definitely, don't shy away from the Static Shiv yet. And GA, they nerfed again from 800 to 500 health, but actually, I believe it was Skara who was talking about this, where I completely agreed with him. The problem with GA is not the health. You still see people building GA. The problem with GA is the fact that you respawn with as much mana as you died with. So if you get all your, you take a bunch of damage, you go to full mana, you get killed, you come back, you have full mana, you cast your ult, and that's why people use it. To get at least 1 guaranteed ultimate off, maybe 2. And that alone will keep it in the meta. If they want it to not be a super OP item, it's not super OP now, but it's still very strong, especially on your tanks, your CC people, the people who really, really rely on that ultimate to get going and to serve their purpose. GA is still a very viable option for those champions. Okay, like I said, big patch. Before we wrap up here, though, I want to quickly take a look at this graphic. Riot, this is something I've got to give them a ton of credit for. I don't think I've seen many companies do this, if any companies do this. They release a graphic every week, the guys who run the TFT portion of League of Legends, and they basically say, this is what we're thinking of doing this coming week. So you'll notice that we've kind of covered it in the last couple of chats, or the last couple of episodes, sorry. And it's got some pretty good stuff on it. Every time it's been fairly accurate. Now, sometimes, they put it out and they'll make a tweak live, so it won't quite necessarily be exactly that. but it's still really, really useful. Like the fact that they do this is, like I said, I got to give the guys who run the TFT thing at Riot massive, massive props. Just for giving us this information so much further ahead of time than most developers would, and really making it a collaborative thing where they ask us about it and people get to comment on it before the changes go live. So people can go, oh, I don't like this, or oh, I really like this, or I think this person needs a nerf, or I think this person needs a buff. And it can allow them to kind of get that feedback and make decisions based on that. You will notice when we pulled it up that, they say they're nerfing nobles. I don't think, at least based on, the fact that they released this graphic before they hotfix nobles, I don't think they're nerfing them. I think they just reverted them and they're just going to stay where they are. So nobles will be the same, most likely. But right now the game is definitely a little bit out of balance. So they definitely do need to make some nerfs. And the ones that are really, really good, I don't think we're going to be able to pull it up for you guys. But if you just type in on Google, the tentative patch notes for the upcoming patch, you can always find it for this patch or for any patches in the future. Just type in tentative patch notes on Google and an image will pop up for you. But they're going to be buffing Anivia, which is good. I think, her and MF are not good 5-cost units. MF, her problem is her ult targeting. Anivia just doesn't do enough damage, and Elementalists is okay right now. But I am a little bit scared about the buff to Anivia because Glacial's always been really, really strong. I could see it being really, really strong again, especially with some of the other changes coming in. And so they're going to have to be careful with how much they tweak that. Gnar, this one surprises me. He's really not good at level 1. Like if you just have a 1-cost level, not 1 cost, but level 1 Gnar, he's not great because he almost never has enough health to get his ult off. But once he hits level 2 or 3, especially if he has items or wild, like 4 wild or something, even 2 wild, he will decimate your team. The hitbox on his ultimate is insane, so the buff to him, watch out for a whole lot more Gnars coming your way. And Morgana, they hit her pretty hard a couple patches ago when they were nerfing demons, when demons were all the rage, and now she's now they're trying to give her some love a little bit back because she wasn't quite being played like at all. You hardly ever saw Morganas. So it's good that they're playing her, and we do have the graphic for you guys. I lied. Super happy about this. So yeah, you can see there the buffs that I just mentioned. Nerf, Draven, Jinx, Kayle, Lucian. Thank the Lord. Honestly, I feel like these are the 4 units that you see the most right now. I mean, Draven and Jinx, like I was saying earlier, if you don't have one of these on your team right now, you will not win the game. You might be able to get top 4 or top 3. You will not win. Like, it's impossible. These 2 units do so much damage. They're so consistent. They wipe everybody. Just too strong. Kayle, they've already nerfed. And the thing is that Kayle 1 really isn't that good right now, but Kayle 2 is still super, super powerful. Like, it's almost impossible to finish the game if you have a stacked Kayle 2 with items, because by the time her ult is over, she will have charged enough mana to cast a second ult. And then she basically keeps 2 people alive at the end of the game for the entire end of the game, and you just lose. Like, it's pretty obnoxious. I think even for her, if they just say that she can't start charging mana again until she's done, like until her ult is done casting, like the shields wear off, I think that would really, really hit her hard. She might still be viable, but she definitely won't be the same pick that she is right now. Lucian, nerf, best 2-cost unit in the game, makes sense. Like I said, Noble, I think, I don't think they're nerfing it. I think they were just reverting the patch, and that's that. And then on Onyx Spark, there's a bug fix going on. I'm not entirely sure what bug they're speaking about, so we'll see how that what bug they're talking about, because I'm not entirely clear on which bug that they're addressing. There's been a couple of like weird wonky things with Onyx Spark. The one thing that they left off is the bug with Warwick, where he still like will either not attack or sometimes randomly just join the other team and attack you. I've seen that happen in a couple games. It's super awkward. But they haven't mentioned that, so I don't know if that's just not being addressed or if they're going to hot fix that, or maybe they have no idea what's causing it and they're trying to figure that out. But that is the week ahead in TFT, the week behind in TFT, the week behind in the LCS, and a look ahead at the LEC. Guys, we have another incredible week of League coming up. This weekend should be awesome. Make sure you are glued to your computer screens. That Riot Games Twitch stream is where all the hype is going to be this weekend, so make sure you check it out, and we will be back next week. We'll have a special guest for you. We'll be breaking down the first round of the LEC and the LCS finals. Take care, guys.